Tommy Riemann was a teenager pumping gas in Independence, Kentucky when he enlisted in the United States Army. In December 2003, he was on a reconnaissance mission in Iraq when his team came under heavy enemy fire. From his Humvee, Sergeant Riemann returned fire. He used his body as a shield to protect his gunner. He was shot in the chest and arm and received shrapnel wounds to his legs. Yet he refused medical attention and stayed in the fight. He helped to repel a second attack, firing grenades at the enemy's position. For his exceptional courage, Sergeant Riemann was awarded the Silver Star. He has earned the respect and the gratitude of our entire country.
It was remarkable. I felt so proud, but I was just a kid. I had no idea what I was standing there for. I was awarded for my actions in Iraq, but I definitely didn't feel like I was the person that should be representing the entire United States Army. My return back to the U.S. wasn't typical. I definitely didn't sleep. My sleep patterns were extremely off. I was vigilant. I was still there. I didn't make that transition mentally and emotionally. And then I had that guilt of my guys were still deployed in Iraq. They were still there fighting. And so here I am, home, upset that I let the enemy injure me and keep me from fighting on the forefront with my brothers. So I carried a lot of weight of resentment. It was tough. So in 2005, I was asked by the Army, Colonel Casey Wardinsky, if I would like to represent the Army. And I was taken back. But then he said, it's about representing the men and women that won't be here. That spoke to me. That was my calling. I knew at that point I had to go represent them. So I did. I stepped into that role and toured the country with America's Army for several years. I felt like I still had somewhat of a purpose, but nothing would ever be greater than that purpose and wearing that uniform, fighting in combat. So I felt the importance, like I knew what I was doing was important, but inside, I just began to get lost. My moral compass was way off. It wasn't zeroed. At that point, because of my time in combat, I had no idea, concept of Christ. I was just lost. And so before you know it, I was an alcoholic. And when I started to feel these emotions that I never was really ready or prepared to handle, I would utilize those substances to suppress that emotion. So I'd been drinking pretty heavily in my life. It started to spiral out of control and go downhill. November 1st of 2013, I got sober. And I think that gave me the idea that there was something greater than myself. And I knew that God was still a possibility. I was very open to it, but still closed off. There was this specific person, Melissa Lynch, in my life that every once in a while, she would bring up scripture and she would bring up, well, that's God working. And I thought she was crazy, but she was persistent. And I envied what she had. And then one day we were working together and she put her hand on the back of my neck and she said, "You're going to church with me." And for whatever reason, I surrendered and said, "Yes, ma'am." And I went in, and it was a crazy experience for me. But the moment Pastor Furtick got up there and started preaching, something came alive inside me. And I was just overwhelmed. I would start to cry, and it didn't stop. And so from that point forward, I didn't stop coming. It wasn't until that point of Easter of 2015 where I gave myself to Christ. I raised my hand so proudly when we did that prayer for the first time, and it was the most freeing feeling I've ever had. And Gabrielle, who I work with, she had said, "Let's go volunteer at Love Week." But she said, everybody volunteers during Love Week. Let's do preparation. And I'm like, that's even better. Let's go. We'll go over there for a couple hours. And what was a couple hours turned into 1 week. And what turned into 1 week ended up being 3 weeks. And now we work over there every Thursday, giving our heart and soul out because that's what we love. That's what we want to do. Love Week to me is an exclamation point on this church of what it can do when people come together and give and give and give. You know, it's amazing through the church, there's so many ways to give back. And so we're recruiting veterans to plug them into the places where needed. And I had this idea and didn't understand exactly what it looked like, but I knew I wanted to get veterans connected to Christ. There's 46,000 veteran nonprofits serving our service members, but like 3 or 4 doing anything about Christ. Your faith is the biggest part of this. Until you're able to find your faith, you can't come home, you can't be free, you can't feel like you're whole again. And so we created Jacob's Ladder to do just that, to give them themselves, to have them find their way in faith. I would say you'll never replace the bond that you have with a guy or gal that you fought in combat with. I don't think you can replace that. But what I found a family that I've been looking for, and I can pour my heart and soul into, and no questions, they'd be there. That's what I've been looking for. That's the peace, that's the freedom, to me, that's what we're trying to create. And I found it.